Now finally, and this is going to be the most complex, this is going back to our arm infinity that we worked on initially in the biomechanical workshop. Can I have you go on your knees? Right here. All of you are familiar with this. Reach around his neck. They place this in the crook of our elbow pit. And then we squeeze our bloody muscles. Squeeze, trying to cause him to go unconscious. Why does it take so long? Because it's depending upon the flexing of our muscles and the placement. Look at it from another perspective. Stay there for a second. The arms screw, like we've worked on. If these arms screw, we come back to the gooseneck. Screw, you're going to increase. It's complete before we come all the way in. We're not even behind yet. If we get behind, he'll be out. Because you're increasing the integrity of the force vectors by screwing them together. So we've looked at the mechanics of actually how to grasp, but let's look at some of the locations and connect that to the force vectors and the hyperfunction that we've been discussing so far. That being true, we look at the arm. Now, we've talked about the different force vectors that are at play. Let's look at how to grab a hold of him to facilitate those force vectors. If we grab a hold of his sleeve, his cuff, we grab a hold of the cuff, what are we controlling? This, in particular, is controlling his wrist, this force vector. If we grab a hold of the sleeve, we're controlling his elbow, this particular joint. From here, we control the force vector of his upper arm. Now, it's not a specific placement. We've looked at how to grasp, and now we're looking at where to grasp. This formula is for you to implement so that you can grab anywhere. In the second installment, quantum gripping, we're going to look at how we can grab anywhere along the jacket as long as our focus is hyperfunction to facilitate the force vectors anywhere along his body. So we now have cuff controlling the wrist, sleeve controlling the elbow, the upper arm, epaulette. Now this is unique to the Samba Kirka, but also on your judo gi and your jiu-jitsu kimono, you have here a seam. Slam your fingers underneath the seam and you control this force vector, his shoulders, from here. It doesn't matter the construction of the material as long as you understand where to grip and why. If we look up higher and we see this collar, the collar is for controlling his neck. We saw this with the gooseneck, right? You have a hold of the cloth here, so you're controlling the head and neck from here or from here on the collar. Sleeve for the elbow, cuff for the wrist, epaulette for the shoulder, collar for the head and neck. Simple formula. We move front. When we control the lapel, if he's turned this way, if I grab his lapel, it's controlling nothing here unless we understand the mechanical advantage that we place on his body by grabbing and controlling the solar plexus. We showed this with the gooseneck. We grab a hold of the lapel, we wrap in appropriately, and we come in to control his solar plexus. Later on in the series, we're going to be discussing this oscillation between the solar plexus and lunar plexus, and how that is the force inertia to control his entire spine. But for now, what I want you to do is I want you to envision this as controlling and dominating his center line. Okay? So we have this simple formula, but it's not complete. We also have this to address and this section of his jacket. If I grab over and get a fistful, this is still going to control him. But what is it controlling? His spine. Later on in our biomechanics workshops, we're going to discuss how to control the lower portions of the spine and the pelvis, which also brings in the belt. From the belt, we control his hips. That's his main driver for most of his actions. From the front belt grab, we control his lunar plexus. Solar plexus, lunar plexus. This prohibits him from entrance. All you have to do is put that structure in the path, and he can't do anything. So now we look at grabbing in the context of force vectors, how to put structure in the way. And this is going to become a common theme throughout: immovable object, unstoppable force.